Hello, everyone. It's like a therapy session here. Hello, my name is Robert, and I'm a designer. Hello, Robert. Let's try that again. Hello. Yes. Give me some love. So my name is Robert, and Hranitzky, the last name, and I'm very, very excited to be here at FMX. So thanks God to Maxon for giving me the chance to talk to you guys. So today I would like to talk about how we create the opening titles for Toca Me. And before we get started, just to get some things out, if you want to follow me on Twitter, you can do that. You can do that on Facebook as well. So please log in, sign up, and hit that like button. And this is like a first, so I haven't done this talk before. I always do new talks for each conference. And we just finished this project, I think 4 or 5 weeks ago. So I haven't really shown this in public. So I really hope... Sorry, actually, wrong button. So before we're gonna get started, I just wanna quickly show you my reel, so you get an idea of what I do other than talking at conferences or doing opening titles for conferences. So here's the reel, and yeah, it's just a minute long, so enjoy. So yeah, that was it, and thank you. Yeah, it's okay. Thank you. So like I said, it's a first. So I really hope it's gonna be a smooth ride, just like this one. I don't know if you recognize that. Yeah. So this talk hopefully will just go as well as this ride. So what is the Toca Me titles about? The Toca Me is a design conference in Munich, and it's been going on for, I think, the last 10 years or so. And they have really an absolutely amazing lineup of speakers. Guys like G. Monk, Joshua Davis, Mayo Klingemann. These folks are usually talking at the conference. And as with a lot of conferences like Off and Play and Pausefest and so on, they have amazing opening titles, almost like a movie. To get the mood going and get the speakers introduced and the title of the conference. So I've been actually lurking to do these titles for a couple of years now, and always ask them and beg them like, hey, can I do the titles? Oh no, it's all right, fuck off. And I'm like, okay, yeah, so I don't do the titles. And then last year they asked me like, hey, so you're still into doing the titles? And I'm like, yeah, now that I have 2 kids and the least time of my life, available in my spare time actually. Yeah, why not? Yeah, of course, bring it on. I'll do the titles. So, of course, I was happy. And the good thing about this project was total creative freedom. And I don't know about you, but if you have total creative freedom, it's a blessing, but a curse at the same time, right? Because you are your own worst client. And it was the same for this project. It was an absolute blast, but at the same time, it was really difficult. So I tried to walk you through the entire process of how we came up with the idea to how we scanned and created this entire thing. So it's going to be a packed hour. I hope you'll be with me and not your heads bursting or popping or anything or falling asleep. But in general, I'm going to give you a big walkthrough about this whole thing. So let's start with ideas and concept before I show the actual titles. So when I got the briefing, all I had was that this thing is about dream big. That was the main theme for the conference. So dream big was the tagline, and obviously the 6 names. So the 6 names were, I think, G. Monk, Joshua Davis, Mayo Klingemann, Sepp Lester, Keiichi Matsuda, and Dominic Wilcox. All 6 super amazing designers, each one of them in their own field, absolutely mind-blowing. Probably not have heard about most of them, but Joshua Davis does stuff for concerts, for Super Bowl. He did all the visuals, everything very interactive and also based on numbers. So it's all very, how you call that? Not big data driven, but data driven. So the mix of mathematics and design, and obviously G-Monk, you might have heard his name before. He did like the Tron stuff and the UIs for Oblivion and so on, and he's just a fantastic director and designer. So I was like, okay, wow, that's a lineup. So some of them also work in motion graphics, so I bet I don't mess up whatever I'm doing. So no pressure there. And so we sat down, and I created a team of a very small team of actually just 2 people for the visuals, 1 for editing, 2 guys for music, and that's basically it. We had another guy who helped out a little bit with 3D cleanup, but that was basically it. And although I cannot say that we didn't have enough time because we had about 9 months, but as you know, with things that are so far off, you just go like, oh man, I'm going to start after Christmas, and then, or before Christmas, and you're like, oh, I'm going to start after Christmas. I'm going to start after New Year, and all of a sudden it's February, and you're like, oh, no, we have 5 weeks or 4 weeks left. So actually, the whole production time was 5 weeks, but full on. And how did we start? Like I said, Dream Big was the main theme, and we sat down, made a couple of notes, and instantly we knew we wanted to create something dreamy, mysterious, maybe have something that you cannot really recognize at first. We wanted to play with light, and I have a bokeh fetish, I would say. You know, I like to make things nice, blurry, also projections, and I wanted to have a very strong relationship from the names of the speaker to the visual. So I didn't just want to do anything that looks fancy, like dropping ink into water. Been there, done that, fine. You get very quickly very sweet-looking results. But there's really no connection from having a drop of ink in water to dream big. So for me, that was why I wanted to have a strong relationship, and I was inspired by stuff. I think you can see it there blurred. Stuff like James Bond titles, or Fight Club, or Westworld, where there's a connection between what you see to the actors. And one thing that stood out for me was, for example, the titles of Captain America, and where, I don't know if you remember that, I think the last one, where you see, let's say, Robert Downey Jr., and then in the background you see Iron Man eyes just blurred out. So there's a connection between the actual actor and the visual, and that's exactly what we wanted to do. So again, we just went in and wrote all the names down. Procedural was the word I was looking for. So Joshua Davis does procedural design, colorful, abstract, patterns. So basically just plain and simple brainstorm work. And for each artist, we came up with a couple of words, and then we kind of developed images. And then we had this idea of why not create a girl, or have a girl filmed, or for that matter, any person. We decided for a girl. And then have a camera very close to the face, that you're so close in a macro level that you really don't actually recognize that it's skin or a face or whatever. So we start out very, very close, and then we move out, move out, move out. At the same time, let the whole scene be illuminated just by projecting stuff onto their face. At first, we wanted to do this in real, like with real projectors, real cameras. Then we found out it's going to be really tricky with, V-sync of the projector, flickering, and actual quality of it, and also doing all the moves. So we decided to go full CG route, and that was a little bit tricky, but that's why I'm here for, to tell you about the process. Before we actually created a single picture, we were searching the web for images that more or less inspired us or gave us a quick image of what we had in mind, and we found a few that more or less resemble what we had in mind. And one of those pictures that is actually it is this one here, where you can see like this whole thing being illuminated, and there's just this one light, madness, being projected onto this face, and the rest is just illuminated by this projection. So that's what we wanted to do. We wanted to have like a greenish, bluish look. So again, stuff like flying particles and dust in the light was also something that we wanted to achieve. So this was kind of our mood board that we created for ourselves, just to see where we're headed. And another thing that was really special for us, or at least what we wanted to do, was, again, to have the connection between the artist's visual and content to the text that you see. So each projection that you see is actually a piece of each artist's work. So it's not just some random artwork, but actual artwork of the artist. And without further ado, here's the title sequence. So yeah, that was it. So 90 seconds of, thank you. 90 seconds with a couple of frames in there that were rendered. And boy, was that a ride, I tell you. So how do we go ahead with this? Like I said, we initially wanted to have a real face and a real camera, but that didn't work out. So we went the 3D scanning route. So thankfully, my friend and partner Daniel, who I'm working with together on this one, he's pretty much a geek in these things, to find new grounds on how to do things yourself that are usually actually pretty complicated or not that easy. And one of those things is 3D scanning. And a little nerd fact, I have I think 4 or 5 nerd facts in there. It took about 750 photos with the Sony Alpha 2 super high res to create the geometry for this 3D model. So the way we did it was actually Daniel found a girl that he wanted to scan. Then there was a mold, like a mold taken, like a negative mold for out of latex. Then this was fed with some like a clay composite material. So we had like a clay model, and that was photographed 750 times, and then run through reality capture to actually create the geometry. And this is the way it looks like. So it's pretty high res. Of course, there needs to be some cleanup to be done, and obviously there's some issues around the eyebrows, eyelashes, and also the ears, because some hair was hanging around her ear. But this gave us a tremendously high detailed model. And in fact, the geometry was so detailed that you could, like, all the pores were little valleys, and all the little every little detail was something like a valley where you could actually fly the camera through. It was quite amazing. So no bump, so it's all geometry. And obviously after that we took it to Zbrush. There was some cleanup done by a talented artist guy called Phil Amelung, and he basically cleaned up the ears, the internal areas of the nose. So these are the areas they're really difficult to scan, but then we had the high detail model that we wanted to actually be able to go into that macro level of detail we wanted to achieve for the first couple of shots. And the first render test we did using Arnold, because Daniel is also the guy who brought actually Arnold to Cinema 4D to life, and he's an Arnold geek, and he, like, when I say let's work on the project, I'm not so sure if I want to render it with Arnold because of time and setups and everything, and I don't know anything about Arnold. But he was like, yeah, let's do it in Arnold. I'm like, oh, okay. So he just goes out, and it's a beautiful renderer, but I just don't understand how it works technically. But these are the first tests we did just to see how it looks like. Obviously, it's a little bit speed up, but there you can see like the whole quality of how the render looks like. So all the pores, there's no bump, there's no texture on it. It's just geometry, and you can see that you have eyelashes and eyebrows on it. So these were added later on Cinema 4D here. So after the ZBrush part was finished, we took it to Cinema 4D because all the main production was about to happen in C4D. And another nerd fact number 2, is that the whole model consists of about 13 million polygons, a little bit more. So it's quite a lot. And the performance was quite well. So we initially had a low-res and a high-res model in there that we could toggle on and off. But turns out that it worked mostly very nicely even with the high-res model. And I can show you some things that we did with After Effects, even with the high-res model, which is quite amazing. So these are some frames, some renders just from the clay renderer, so clay models, pretty much close up. So this gave us a good feeling of, yeah, we can probably pull this off, being so close to the model. I was nervous up until 2 minutes of the screening, not knowing if it's really gonna work out, but this gave us some good vibes to know, okay, this is where we want to go, and this looks kind of satisfying. Again, a few shots. None of this was used for the actual production. It's just actually to see and to check how the model looks like. And this is the actual camera movement, because at the end, obviously, the girl wakes up, and this is the conclusion of this whole thing. Girl wakes up, conference starts, off we go. So the next step was doing an animation, or the animation part, and also use that as an animatic before even doing any projections or looks or anything, because the 2 music guys, Andi Thoma and Michael Farkisch, who are incredibly talented, and actually 2 friends, and I kind of pulled them together for this project to work together to create the music and the beautiful score. They needed something to work with. They were like, Robert, so when can we start working the music? What do you want? I'm like, yeah, I don't know. It's gonna be, I don't know, maybe K-Pax kind of style. I don't know if you've seen the movie K-Pax. It's quite a nice movie. It has this mysterious sci-fi sound, but with a positive vibe, so it's not too dark, because the images were pretty dark, so we wanted to have it balanced a little bit. So I gave them that as an inspiration. They sent me some tracks back that I liked, that they created, and then actually when we were ready for the animatic, they started to do the score. And the way we approached this, we had a pretty solid plan of starting really, really close and moving out to the end. So as you can see, this is more or less the shot progression. So for the first one, you can see that here it's actually, hang on, let me go back one. For the first one, you can see that it's looking like I don't know, maybe a planner or something. So you can't really make out what it is. That was the goal. And also for the second and for the third one, that's the same, because right here, for example, you will see the nose, but only after a while. So this looks like a horizon. This is actually the eyeball, but you can't really see it. You can see it here in this render that it's the lips, but you cannot see it so much in the final. But the more and more we go outside and pull out, you will obviously see the reveal. And another thing was, I love photography, so I like to base everything around real depth of field effects and real focal length, so there's no fancy thing. I mean, I don't know who of you knows that you can in fact change the focal length in Cinema 4D from 36 millimeters. You know, I think that's what most of people are using, and you go like, oh, hang on, this frame looks totally different if you have 85 millimeter. Why? Because, for example, if you watch closely, you should be able to see that for these shots, we use something like 85 millimeter, which is more like a classic focal length for a portrait shot. If we would have used 35, her nose would be big as this. It would look not so good, believe me. So that's why we carefully chose the focal length for each shot and did all the animation. And this is the rough animatic, really just rendered with a standard hardware render, so no effects, no look whatsoever, just camera movements. And basically we used, we kind of looked, okay, where would the type be looking nicely in terms of composition and framing, and we also used some of the guides that you can activate in Cinema 4D. I think you can see them somewhere. So you have the rule of thirds and the spiral, so I kind of used that to more or less get a natural and beautiful looking composition into, there you can see it, into the shot. So wherever your eye wanders and looks, and we didn't worry about projection at this part at all. But this basically has been then sent to the music guys, and then they instantly went crazy and they're like, oh yeah, it looks awesome. I'm like, no, it's not finished yet. So, oh yeah, but it's a cool look, you know, we could work that, you know, could use this for a concert as visuals. And I'm like, yeah, but you know, we can make it look nicer. And just imagine. But they were just awesome. They were just going off and creating the score, and then this is like the final tweaks when they had the final or almost final version. So yeah, that was big fun. So let's talk about projections. How and why and how do you get the projections onto the surface of the actual model? Well, we did a few tests initially after having the model ready and after having animatic ready. We did tests just to see how can we come up with this look, and it was really tricky because if you are not really lighting the model traditionally or not using an HDR or anything, it's really difficult to kind of direct how the look of this whole thing will be. And of course, you also have to use GI, global animation, to actually create the bouncy light. So for example, if I project with a flashlight onto my face, you know, part of my big nose will be illuminated and part of my cheek will be illuminated, but the rest will be dark. But you will see a little bit of highlights here and there. So it was kind of a tap into the mystery of darkness, and we didn't have the actual images ready, but we used Daniel's logo, Ugly Kids here, just to see how this will look. And I think these are first tests with Arnold still. So this is everything straight off the render, no comp there, just to see how the rays, the volumetric lights will affect this, and how actually the bounciness of the light will affect the surrounding area. So these renders were kind of giving us an idea where we wanted to go. But we were a little bit afraid of the render times. So the render times were immensely high. For one, having this high poly count, having things like subsurface scattering, and also in basic GI, volumetric lights. I mean, these are all things where you just go like, no, just don't render that. Don't hit that button. No, oh shit, hit that button. And then you wait. And then you go off for a lunch break. And then you're like, oh yeah, when I come back from lunch break, I see 1/3 of the frame. And then you go like, okay, so how can we pull this off? A bit more about this later, but these were a few tests that gave us a little bit of confidence, but shocked us at the same time. This is one of the very early tests using actual artwork from Joshua Davis, projecting it on the surface, and we found that this whole thing is way too bright. As you can see, you see some blue and red. This is like the color version. And we found that using the colored versions will not work because each artist has a different style, each artist uses different colors, and this whole thing is just going to look like a mess. There would be no cohesiveness of this whole piece. So that's why we decided to take each artwork and create a black and white version of it. So these are all the artworks, as you can see. Actually, just a selection. They were just bombarding us with artwork, and you just go to stuff like, and you go like, oh my God, this is so good, this is so good. And you were just in awe about this talent, and yeah, you try to just do justice to it and do something nice, but still you just go like, okay, wow, this is crazy. But at the same time, you can see this is all very colorful, all weird and different. And how can you pull this together to have one style that kind of matches it all? And we decided, okay, let's put it in black and white, and let's just go with certain areas. So obviously, everything that is black will not be illuminated. Everything that is white will be super bright. So we try to balance it, to find something that gives us areas of brightness, but also darkness to have contrast. And yeah, we looked for some images, and these are the ones that mostly worked out well. And then we thought, okay, if you just take this image as it is and project it on, you will have super hard edges and everything looks just so pristine. But if you look at the projector really closely, even if I look here now, you see some, actually you almost don't see any chromatic aberration. So it's a kick-ass projector. But normally you will see a little bit of imperfections, right? And we try to replicate those imperfections just as the pixel, the mosaic or the rasterization effect. So we try to mimic that, and that's why we took all of the images that we used into After Effects. You used particular as a source and created a particle raster effect so that we have the specific look, added chromatic aberrations to them, so we had the whole cohesiveness of these projections together. Next thing, we took that into Cinema 4D. We created a light. And into the light, there was a parent, which was a camera. And then we used camera projection mapping that was actually projecting the texture onto the geometry. And we used a null object as a target, so we could actually move around the null object and see how that will affect the position of the projection. So there was a lot of trial and error to find the proper angle and the proper way of where do you want it illuminated and how should it move. So this was the main part of Daniel working on this while I was already working on some comp for some other shots that were already finished. So we're working in tandem, and this worked out really well. And obviously, we used one setup with where you can actually have the texture on it, but obviously you don't render the texture, but you just render the light that is being used as kind of like a matte in the light itself. And then we rendered a second pass just with the volumetric lights and combined everything in post. And here you can see a little breakdown of the process of taking one of G-Monk's artworks, which is this image of some LED light tunnel, giving it the pixel treatment, chromatic aberration treatment, making everything black and white, and then projecting it onto, I think the lips was this shot and the way it looks like. So this was the general process of how this whole projection thing worked. And like I said, it was a lot of trial and error. There was really no wrong or bad ways. It was just about finding out what looks best given the geometry that you have, and also not wanting to reveal too much. So as I said before, in the animatic, you could actually see that it slips, but in the final that you see in a second, you don't really see it slips. You kind of guess it, but that's okay, because I think it's the 6th shot or so in, so it's okay. And here, by the way, is Feli, our model that we used. So she was kind enough to come back again for another shoot where we wanted to film her eyes for the final shot, where we project her eye footage onto her 3D footage. We tried to explain her what we're doing. She didn't kind of understood it, but she was like, okay, wow, that I don't know, but oh yeah, just show me the final, okay? So she was very sweet, very patient, and here's some shots that we did with her eyes. So I explained to her, yeah, you open your eyes, you're waking up, and then all of a sudden, your eyes are open. And she was like, okay. And so she was trying back and forth. So that was fun. And yeah, then let's move on to the typography part. For me, as someone who studied design and loves typography, this was obviously something that was not something that I just slap on the Comic Sans or whatever. I wanted to use something that looks nice. So I was looking into different fonts, and actually I studied in Mannheim, so it's funny that this room is called Room Mannheim, not far from here. Shout out to Mannheim, my boy, and yeah, that was fun to work with typography. I had the fortune I was fortunate to have a very old school Swiss typography teacher, professor that taught me how to do typewrite. And so I wanted to make this really nice, but not too not in your face. Some animation, but really gentle. Similar to a client saying, make it black but not too dark, or make it white but not too bright, stuff like that. But again, I was my own client, so I tried to just justify it to myself, which again was hard enough. But our first test was using a non-serif type. Of course, you can use the Trajan, which is like the movie font, but we didn't want to go that route, so we thought about using a non-serif font, which is the Adriana. I wanted to have a thin font. I just love thin fonts. Also in stark contrast to the bold images. Again, everything is thought of, and nothing is just okay. Yeah, I just whatever. I scroll through fonts and someone says stop, and then choose this font. No, it's not going to work. Then we also looked at the Roboto Thin. It's also a beautiful font. It was a favorite for a long time. And then also we looked at the Gotham, which is a very classic and traditional font, a little bit overused, as I hear. But at the end, we just used the Adriana, which is the first one, because I thought it just looked beautiful in the weights, but also in terms of balance and everything. And then in terms of animation, this is what I came up with. It's actually pretty simple, but then it's not again. It's a couple of After Effects layers, using several blurs and using masks as blur layers. So I'm basically moving like a fractal noise, and wherever there's I think gray. It was like it was gray matte more or less, and everywhere where there's white, things get distorted quite a bit, and everywhere there's black, there's no distortion. So just move this over the type, and then this gives this distortion effect. And I have, for each artist, I have a separate setup, so nothing is the same. Each one is different, and it gave a very organic look, and you almost really don't notice it in context of the underlying footage. So it gives a very good harmony to the whole image. So that was what we wanted to achieve. This was all done as pre-comp and then put together in compositing on top. So let's talk about rendering. Are you still with me? How are you doing with time? Okay, perfect. So rendering. So I told the story about seeing the render times for the first time, and I'm like, okay, so we have 4 weeks left, or 3.5 weeks by that time. Okay, should I call them and tell them that the titles are going to be ready for next year's conference? Or what do I do? So it was a little bit of a panic time, but I remember that I had a great friend in contact at Google Zinc, and he was telling me about building up this whole Zinc render thing with Google. I don't know, who has heard about Zinc render before? No one? No one? I'm sure there's at least 2 guys back there who should have heard about it. Yeah, so it's a fantastic render service. Who has heard of RebusFarm? Right. So it is something like this. So it's basically something where you send off your files into the cloud. They get rendered online or in the cloud. Actually, it's not in the cloud, but sitting there at Google somewhere. But they send you back the files, and you got the final renders. The good thing is that it's super easy to set up, and it's pretty affordable. I can show you actually the things that we had. And knowing Google, they have a few computers here and there that you can use to actually render your frames. And that was fantastic, because on average, a frame took 2 hours. There were a few that took half an hour, there were others that took 4 hours, so it was really crazy. Depending really on how close you are, what the actual content of the projection mapping is, all these things were affecting us. So some of these situations were like this, just waiting for something. And if we decided to render it on our own machines, we could have done this actually. Use our machines to cook anything on them, because they would be just overheating, because it was just so massive. So yeah, Google, thanks to Google, we had a cooperation to be able to pull this film off. So I went ahead, registered for Zinc. I thought, okay, I'm going to give it a try, see how this thing works. So it's actually pretty straightforward. You go into zinkrender.com, you register your own URL. You need to have a Google account, which I guess most of us do. Obviously, you accept the terms of service and so on. Then you have to download two little apps, or one is a plugin, one is a little app. It's a client app. You install those, and then you get this message. So it's kind of like, okay, so I've heard of a few people that were kind of like stopped there because they don't know what to do. It's like a security thing that is built into Mac OS, so don't worry about this. You just go into your security settings and click yes, allow that to be installed. So it's actually just unlocking this blocking. So after this is done, you are then ready to go, and you will find it right there in Cinema 4D, and I can actually show you this right now if you want to see it, how it looks. And are you interested to see how the projection thing was? Since I have it open, I think we're doing good in time, so I'm just quickly going to show that more or less spontaneously. So so this is the actual model, and this is the full res model. So this works surprisingly well. You can scrub through. You can see how the detail looks like. You can go in and see that it is crazy. Let me just go ahead and do quick shading. So this is how it looks like, and you can actually fly through the lips. So yeah, that was fine. So this is the setup, but let's go back and see some of the lighting. And this is the lighting that we have. So again, we have, I was lying, we then have lights. We have one light that is super minimal, just to give it some ambient light, but that's it. And then we have the main light. And this main light has a texture on top of it and a camera that's parented to it. And obviously there's a target. So we have the light target, so we can move that light target to define where the projection should be sitting on the face. And here we have the high-res scan of the model. So what we can do now is actually we can use the same texture, put this texture in here, and go ahead and say, I want to have camera mapping. What is the camera? This is the camera. We use this super wide Panavision aspect ratio, and then you can see it right here. Okay, so we can also go ahead and show transparency, because this is transparency, and you can play that back. Obviously, this will be a little bit more stuttery because it's calculating all the transparency in real time. So that's why we had a low res and a high res. I'm just using the high res. But I can show you a workaround. Actually, just go ahead and use color, bitmap, place a texture in here, and just put the texture here in. And this should be it. And now you can see it a little bit better. Let's turn transparency off. And there you have it. So you can see some type going around. And if I want to move around the projection setup, I can just do that very comfortably here. So I can find out where does it look best, where can you actually read it. So this was the setup that we did to project everything on. Obviously, you have to remove the texture before you render, because you're not rendering the texture, but you're just rendering light. And we did a second pass where we had visible light active. So we wanted to have volumetric light. More about that a bit later. But talking about Zinc again, you go into plugins, and then you find it on top, actually in the middle, render with Zinc. So if you hit that, it will log in, and also you should launch your little client app that I have already installed. It's set on auto login, so everything is there. And I'll quickly walk you through some of the settings. You good to see the settings, or? Yeah, cool. So I'll quickly walk you through because I think it's worth it. First of all, it supports takes, which is great. So not all render clients support take system. We didn't use takes in this case, but it is supported here. You can specify image output path on Zinc, but you can also go ahead and specify this on in your Maxon render. So it's you set up the render just the way you would do it. So there's nothing fancy in here. It's just the standard physical render that we used here, GI on, multipass, depth, nothing too fancy. So all the magic happens here. You say upload only auxiliary files. That's fine. You can leave that on default. We have frame ranges from 1 to 100. That was the normal shot, and the long shot where you see the typography was 125 frames. So that was a bit longer. But usually we had 100 frames, so let's pretend this would be 100 frames because it's easier to do the math. Frame step, that's important because first we use frame steps of 10 or 15, and it will render every 10th or 15th frame to just give you a quick look on how the frames will look like. So there's nothing fancy going on. And then chunk size is how many files after render will be downloaded after they're done. For me, I put it on 1 because what I have, okay? So I don't, if anything just goes, I don't know, my internet connection is lost or whatever, I make sure I have this 1 frame. And even if you look at the frame count or frame render time of 2 hours, this could be a matter of waiting 2 hours for that final last frame. So make sure you have a chunk size of 1. Each frame gets downloaded after it's finished. And this one I love. Number of machines. So by default, it's, I think, at 50. Is that right? Is it 50? I think default is 50. And if you log in and if you register, you can email them and tell them, hey, I want to get this 50 limit off. Then it's going to be bumped to 100, which means I can render 100 frames at 100 machines. Okay? So let me give you some perspective. Let's say a frame takes 2 hours, okay? And you have 100 frames. That would be 200 hours, okay? That would mean if I would submit a render today on my local machine, just on 1 machine, I would have to wait on Friday to see those 4 seconds. If I'm rendering this on the cloud, I'm just going to do a long lunch break, and I'm going to see the final result. I mean, that's pretty crazy to process. It took me a while. I think it was pretty mind-blowing, and that was exactly it. So we're in it at 100 frames this shot, and the next shot, again, 100 frames with 100 machines. And just within 2 hours, you basically could render 5 scenes. So that's actually pretty amazing, I think. And you can see the pricing here, which is quite phenomenal, I would say. There's the normal Zinc, which is goes up to 32 virtual CPU cores. There's the alpha, which has 64 cores. We didn't use this one. And we use preemptible. And I'm not sure if this is like a rule or something, but we thought, okay, so using preemptible machines during German nighttime would be not so clever because it would be US daytime. So thinking that maybe there's more usage, then maybe the machines get pulled away, because that's what preemptible means. Preemptible means that you can start a renderer, and it is a lot cheaper, but it can be taken away if there's some other service where the machine is needed, right? So we thought, hey, we're going to render it during daytime, which is nighttime in the US, and I think only once was a machine taken. And since we have the chunk size at 1, we could just continue wherever it stopped. So it's a great way to go. You should give it a try. It's really straightforward. So you launch the job here, and once you launch it, you will actually see the web console. And there everything is basically, I think this is still the old one. I thought it was all gone, but it's still there. So I don't know. So yeah, you can see here are the frames. So this one was pretty easy. It's 1 hour per frame. You can see if it's done. You can re-download. And another little pro tip, transfers. If you have, to configuration. If you have a good internet connection, I would bump this up to maybe 50 or 20, depending on how fast your connection is. This will define on how many images at the same time will be downloaded. And then you're basically good to go. And this is how it should normally look like if you're downloading the files. Come to me. Each one between 1 and 6 megs. We run at PNG, 16-bit. So again, nothing crazy. This is all the stuff coming down. So that was fun. Really, really great experience. I urge you to try it out if you haven't done so. Total render hours was about almost 3,200 hours. Actually, it was a little bit more because some of the things we rendered locally, like the volumetric lights, they weren't so crazy in terms of rendering. So we try to balance and not put too much stress on the Zinc service. So we tried to balance it, and yeah, this was it. Let's talk about compositing, because there was a lot of compositing going on. Me being more of an After Effects guy, going into Cinema 4D rather than the other way around. So obviously everything had to go through After Effects. There's no renderer that's not going at least through Photoshop or After Effects once. So this is a couple of the breakdowns, and just to see how many layers we use. We didn't go too crazy in terms of multipass. Like I said, we have separate volumetric lights and separate depth pass, and that was it. And we rendered all the depth of field in After Effects using Frischluft, and all the particles are actually particular. And I'll show you some things that I learned along the way for that as well. And these are just some breakdowns. We used some sapphire glow on the projections, just to give it some more oomph, as you would say, yeah, to make it more glowy. And obviously at the end you will see optical flares, but not too much, just little, just in the corners. You don't see actually a real flare, but it will give you this little highlight. And here's another thing with optical flares. I mean, it's been so overused, and it's a great plugin, but a lot of people forget that you can actually also use it to light scenes. So if you turn off all the flare, liney, blingy stuff and just leave the actual glow, this will give you a beautiful inverse fall-off square fall-off light thing, right? Which is different than just creating a color ramp, because it just looks different. You know, you have it much stronger, and the fall-off is different than what you have in a linear ramp. So this gives you a much nicer effect, and also we added some flickering just to give it more depth and just atmosphere. And again, I think this one is the last. And if you look closely, you will see that there is the flying dust particles. They're most prominently visible where the actual visible light is. So if you look up at the projector, so wherever the projector beam is coming out, you will see all the dust and everything, the nice little, I don't know what you call it, you know, it just looks just nice. And that's why we did it exactly in those areas. You see a little bit of particles here and there, also some nice big bokeh particles. It's actually 3 layers, so we have small particles, medium, and big chunk bokeh stuff. This is a recording, actually. Let me see how we're doing in time. Yeah, I will show you this live, just because it's so much fun. It's going to be really briefly, but I think it's pretty interesting to see. I think I was probably one of the first people to use Cineware. Have you heard about Cineware? Yeah, it's the Maxon Cinema to Adobe After Effects bridge, where it allows you to bring in Cinema 4D files into After Effects and really see 3D files in After Effects, which was pretty crazy at that time. It has evolved over time. It's quite fantastic. Obviously, you would not want to render this in After Effects because you would not want to wait 2 hours per frame. Not in After Effects, not in Cinema 4D. So why should you use it in After Effects? Well, you can use it, and again, this is the live 3D data. So this is the actual Cineware plugin doing its thing. So this is not rendered. I could actually change the camera, and this is the OpenGL performance in After Effects using the high geo with 13 million polygons. So it's quite impressive, I must say. But apart from showing off why it is so cool, what was the actual usage of it? Well, we didn't render it in After Effects, but if you look into the Cineware plugin settings, you will see something that's called extract. So what can we extract? Well, if I click on extract, I will extract a camera and a null object that I placed in the middle of the nose or the mouth area, or actually under the lips in this case. And this will define my source where I want to have particles. So for one, I have the exactly same camera that I have in Cinema 4D, and now I have a null object that has position parameters, which is at 1, -7, 9, so almost at 0, 0, 0. But being so close, even the value of 1 is like a mile away. So bear that in mind. And then, of course, a particular layer that I'm just going to enlarge now for the particles and make it look more like snow, because we're super, super tiny at 0.005. But I'm going to make it 0.002. But we see that we don't see anything, right? Why is that? Because the particle source is at its default, which is 960 by 4, 2, and 0, so which is the middle of the actual composition. But in this case, we just have to go in and say -7.7, and in Z space 9.3. And all of a sudden, we can see that, right here. Again, way too big, but just to blow it up to even for the back row to see everything. And this is exactly the same camera movement that we have in Cinema 4D. And what this will give us some depth, some parallax effect, some nice atmosphere. And of course, you have to tone it down, make them really small. I added a little bit of opacity, random blinkiness. So this is how you can actually draw, and this will make them fade in and out and actually flicker. And I used the actual volumetric light map that you can see here. So this is the final. And if I open this up, you will see this is our normal shot, and this is our volumetric light. So I use this to actually mask out the particles. And again, adding another layer of particles to have some there, but these are the strongest visible particles. And then again, using Frischluft depth of field to satisfy my bokeh needs, which just looks fantastic. And again, a few of the settings that you want to do is maybe play with the facets, make it like a 6-faceted bokeh effect, play with the border thickness. I don't know if you can really see it here. No, you can't. But you can make out a particle here, and which has super strong bokeh effect. It will just look nicer. And then obviously for the final thing, so this will define the look of it all. So if you look at this is the almost raw render with some lights going on and optical flares. And I added some Red Giant Mojo to create this green bluish effect. It's pretty straightforward. It just gives you a couple of sliders that you can manipulate, like settings for balance and tint and bleach it and punch it, which is contrast basically. So it's very easy and straightforward because we didn't want to go too crazy with grading it. And then one of my favorite effects is warp chroma. which just gives us little imperfections. And again, we use warp chroma or a chromatic aberration effect on the projection source, but also on the final piece. And warp chroma will give you this little imperfection here, and you can see this is like the pure render, and this will make it a little bit blurry, but give those nice little fringes of red, green, and blue, making this too perfect image a little bit more imperfect, and making it better by that. And obviously also adding some grain to give you some nice, I think here you can see quite well. So this is without it. You always run into risk of having some banding problems, but adding grain will give it a nicer look and also counter the effects of banding. So this is how this whole thing was basically comped together. And again, you can see some of the breakdowns. Again, a depth shot that we created directly out of C4D. Again, the pure render as it came out of Cinema 4D. Adding glow. Adding the volumetric light pass. Blurring it all up. It's so crazy, actually. You add it and then you just fire it away and you almost, but you can still feel it. Yeah, you have a question? No. No. The question was if we had problems with flickering. It was all flicker free. I can actually check the render settings to show you if you want what we used for physical. We used adaptive. Sampling was at 3, 2, 3 for GI. We used the Monte Carlo mode. And that was basically it. So nothing too fancy, and it was all flicker free. What we had though, and maybe that's a little very fast quick tip, was some noise. Since we didn't went too crazy with the settings because obviously we wanted to finish this thing. And one good tip to do is, I don't know if you've tried it or not. Let me see if I have it in this shot or not. But actually I do, but it's not active. So we had some of this here. Okay, so this is because of the sampling rate. But we used reduced noise from Neat Video. You know that plugin? It's crazy. I mean, look at it. It's 99% gone, despite keeping the crispiness. It's absolutely fantastic. So if you're using things that have some noise, try running it through reduced noise. I think it's like a €100 plugin that will actually save you thousands of render hours if you crank it up more. So this is how you can balance it quite well. So this is maybe a neat trick. But we're about to wrap it up. Let me just walk you through these final layers. Again, dust and debris and just little flickering thingies. Light pass, grading and look. And this is the final shot, for example, a little breakdown of, so this was the shot where she could keep her mood and really not laugh. And then we used some bokeh in the background, projected it on her. Position was matching quite well because it was the same proportion. All good. So, thanks so much, everyone. Yeah, again, if you want to stalk me on Twitter, on Facebook, please do so. There's actually a full-on making-of 5-minute video on Vimeo. You'll find it on Vimeo/Hranitzky. You can check that out as well. And again, thanks so much. My name is Robert, and have a great day at FMX. Thank you.